November 16th, 2024. This is the Canadian journalist formerly known as Ernie Racing News. Hey guys, my name is Marcel. Here is an opinion on the Western Standard from HANNAFORD, and it's quite interesting. It's not Elon Musk who threatens Canadian news, it's Trudeau. So let's get into the article here. A random tweet of a Liberal MP does not, of course, represent Liberal government policy, but when Liberal Whitby MP Ryan Turnbull tweeted, it was scary that a Poilievre-led government would end subsidies to mainstream media and defund the CBC. You can bet he is channeling Liberal water cooler conversation. After all, the Liberals love the CBC. They love it so much that as reported by Blacklocks, they want to leave the door open for CEO Catherine Tate, remember that crazy redhead, to receive a bonus as she leaves the building for the last time, even though under her leadership the CBC loses money, which is to say it can't live within the $1.4 billion budget allowed it by the Government of Canada. Mercy, who gets a bonus when they lose money? Actually, in the CBC, a lot of people, 45 senior executives got to share $3.3 million, an average of $73K each. You can read about it here, but we're moving on. Nice work if you can get it then, but seriously, why would a Liberal MP find defunding the CBC and ending subsidies to the mainstream media so, quote, scary? Sad for people who lose their jobs, of course, and in the case of the CBC, there are still people with a sentimental attachment to growing up on a remote Saskatchewan farm and a childhood of listening for the crackle of hockey night in Canada on their grandfather's steam radio, driven radio. I understand that actually and have my own sense of loss when remembering the years when we get behind the microphone at the BBC, you had to speak received English. But how much do you want the struggling taxpayer to pay for that? And in Turnbull's case, it's got nothing to do with sentiment. Anyway, it's the stopping the checks would mean, quote, greatly diminishing the information economy in Canada and making us dependent on social media platforms owned by American billionaires for our news, end quote. And there is a picture of his, so he's using, Twitter X, to, as a sense of free speech where he can share his thought. But his thought is about ending free speech, and well, I want it all controlled. So here we have his post. Again, scary thought. A Poilievre-led government would end subsidies to mainstream media and defund the CBC, greatly diminishing the information economy in Canada and making us dependent on social media platforms owned by American billionaires for our news. How ironic that he posts on this free speech thing owned by a billionaire. All right. Like the one he was using to make his comments, for example, which even though owned by an American billionaire is actually a free speech free-for-all. For heaven's sake, man, don't complain you're hungry when your mouth's full. That's a good way to analogy. But he has no problem at all with news being filtered through what? Something bought and paid for by the Government of Canada that behaves with the predictability of a wholly owned subsidiary of the Liberal Party. I suppose if they're playing your tune, it's easier to justify to yourself, but one wonders how Mr. Turnbull would feel about the sanctity of the CBC's budget if a mischief demon switched out the key presenters and replaced them with people who thought like Fox News, Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity, and Dana Perino. Picture, if you will, Judge Jenny Pereiro holding Liberal feet to the fire, holding Ryan Turnbull's feet to the fire. In fact, he'd hate it. They'd hate it, and they're much more comfortable with Catherine Tate's worldview, one that, according to True North, quoting the U.S. Federal Election Commission, can even accommodate her donations to Hillary Clinton's presidential election campaign in 2016, the year that the Fox favorite defeated her for the U.S. presidency. It is fun and easy to mock Turnbull and other dopes around the water cooler, but here's what's actually scary. It's the Trudeau Liberal plan to confine speech and expression in Canada in a cage with 3 bars. Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act, Bill C-18, the Online News Act, and Bill 63, the Online Harms Act. C11 was passed last year and brought streaming services such as YouTube and Netflix under the control of the CRTC. Bill C18 was meant to force Google and Facebook to hand over cash to failing mainstream news media. Facebook responded by refusing to be a paperboy any longer for an ungrateful Canadian media. Now, C63 remains at second reading in the House of Commons, but if passed, would usher in an Orwellian world which the name of stamping out, quote, hate would in fact create an Office of Approved Speech and Thought Crimes by setting up a so-called Digital Safety Commissioner. Expression considered hateful by the courts will be made punishable by up to life in prison. And by the way, under this legislation, if you've said anything in the past that somebody decides to take offense to today, anybody, your ex-wife, your evil-minded neighbor, or just somebody who wants to make a quick 20K because that's the reward due to a successful complainant, this kangaroo court can decide you might do it again and impose restraints on you, including house arrest and denial of internet access. Holy crap, guys. Yeah, this is just out of control. Orwellian for sure. 1984, guys. Your neighbor, the rats, the Karens are going to be paid $20,000 for a successful complaint. I'm sure I've said a lot in the past. Looks like I'll be going to jail if the Orwellian Canada continues. In the world of Minority Report, those with a further interest in how the Liberal government, of which MP Turnbull is a part seeks to restrain private speech, will find improving the remarks of our friend Ezra Levant to the George Jonas Award dinner hosted a few months ago by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. Oh, that part read all funny. Anyway, as commentator Jen Gerson put it, quote, these measures reveal deeply authoritarian instincts towards speech and regulation, end quote. And why, Timothy Denton, a consultant and former CRTC commissioner, says leaders in Canada elsewhere have simply become nervous about the manner in which the internet has freed citizens from their control. It's hugely expanded the capacity for independent thought, he says, and so, quote, must be hampered and stopped, end quote. Exactly. If Ryan Turnbull finds the CBC to his taste, that's his prerogative. But as for me, count me in with the many Canadians who prefer to take their chances with Elon Musk rather than a government-subsidized media that in return for 30 pieces of silver from Trudeau picks up the handcuffs and snaps them on tight. Well, guys, thanks for watching. I'm just having my morning latte here out of Kelowna, BC, and this is the Canadian Journalist. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Yeah, we're trying to get this channel moving. It's moving pretty slow to start with, like real slow. So let's hope it all comes together. Thanks for watching.